have to turn on my video if I can. I can. Okay.
Let me just talk about the process for today. So I thought what we should do is welcome Councilmember Rice. Jeff can go through the packet where he has listed a lot of amendments, and we can go through those one at a time. And then an amendment, any amendment that a council member wants that's has not already been addressed, we would then turn to those. But then we would save for last the soil discussion. So we will skip over a soil-related amendment, either in the packet or from a council member. We'll save those until the end. So I know we have memos from committee members with various amendments. So we'll just proceed through the packet, and I think they're mentioned in the packet. And then if there's anything that's not mentioned, we can get to it. My co-chair and I would like to hard stop this at 3:30. So we may get through it or we may not. And if we don't, we'll return. But you know, I think we'll see how this goes. So is that clear? Good. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, we're ready. I am going, straight through the packet on the issues raised, and the first was whether you should restrict solar facilities to qualified community solar facilities. Now, a community solar facility is one where the subscribers to solar reside in the same area, the same power company area as the facility itself. So if your residence is served by PEPCO, the solar facility must be in PEPCO's area. So that's that kind of restriction. But there are really two things within the net metering program for the state of Maryland. One is the community solar that says you subscribe to a solar facility, multiple subscribers, and a power company consolidates those to one facility. That's community solar. There's another program for nonprofits, agriculture in general, and state and local government, which is aggregated net energy. So if I, as a state or local or a nonprofit, have multiple facilities that where I can't provide the solar on site, I can consolidate all of my energy usage and put up a facility off-site that provides for those needs. Both of those programs are qualified for the net metering programs, which allows the solar facility to sell back excess power at any time to the local power company at retail rates. So they certainly have that benefit. What I provided in the packet and is an amendment that would restrict it to both of those types of facilities, both community solar and the aggregated solar program. One of the caveats here is that in those programs, the limitation is a maximum of 2 megawatts, but 2 megawatts on what? And what they say is on the parcel or contiguous parcels with the same owner. That is within the state legislation, and you'll see on page 3 of my memo that I'm proposing at the request of Park and Planning, so they don't confuse anybody, to put that into the amendment itself. Other than that, the amendment that restricts it just refers to both state law and COMAR that outlines these programs.
Okay. I'm reminded that I didn't say welcome to the joint meeting of the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee and the Transportation, Infrastructure, Environment Committee. Returning to the proposed zoning text amendment to allow for solar in land that's been zoned AR, or agricultural reserve. Okay, so Councilmember Tawanda would like to speak to this amendment, specifically to this amendment, I believe.
Yes, just very briefly, as I hope, and I hope this isn't controversial. This is something that was included in our memo, and I know others have mentioned it as well. I think the goal here is that we do want to move forward protecting our environment, having solar, but make it a community solar program. And so I think this amendment helps narrow that and focus it. And I'm in support of both aspects here for this community solar in the aggregate net energy metering. So just wanted to say that briefly.
Thank you. And thank you, Jeff, for explaining it clearly. Not always easy to do. Councilmember Glass. I want to say it. I support this as well. I think we should do this as well.
Everybody does.
Right.
Exactly.
As do I. And Mr. Zients, the question I had, there are a number of things as we'll talk about. Our individual ideals, right, and goals might not always match up with either existing statute or in some cases state statute. And so I just want to understand for this that we can do this and that the state law provides us the ability to do it.
Yes, I mean, this is a not quite unique program, but it's a very beneficial program for the consumers and the providers of solars. It somewhat prejudices other electric customers because they have to buy this solar energy at retail prices, but it does advance the greening of Maryland, if you will.
Sure. As was mentioned at the last meeting by others, some of these things should be updated in Annapolis to be a little more fair as well. But I just wanted to make sure it's doable. So I support it too. Thank you.
Thanks. And for my committee, for everyone here as a council member, I think we should text me when you want to speak because I may be looking at a map or the packet and I may not know that you're raising a hand. So we'll try that. Andrew.
I'll do that next time. I just texted you, but you probably didn't have time to respond. I'll just note I support this as well. I think this aligns the goal with the language of the legislation and was included in our memo as well. I know a lot of us have moved towards this, so support this, appreciate it, and I think I'm glad we're starting in an area of significant consensus. So that's good.
Absolutely. All right, and welcome to Greg Russ from the Planning Department and Christopher McGovern from the Planning Department and Robert Cronenberg. All right. There are a lot of people who can turn their cameras on.
Trying.
So I would just say use discretion. If you think you're likely to be actively participating, keep it on. It is easier for us to see our fellow council members and for the audience, I think, to focus on who's speaking, the fewer people who are on screen. So
I agreed. Please, let's.
Thank you. All right. Okay, good. So I think that's without objection.
Okay.
Welcome to everybody who's here.
All right. The next issue is concerning fences. There was a lot of interest in not requiring a fence. Currently, the language of the ZTA as proposed would make that requirement. As I understand it, a insurance company would require a large solar company to do the fence. So even if you didn't require it, the companies would do it anyhow. The problem may occur if you prohibit offense, and that might be the same as saying no to the solar facility. So I'm at the council's pleasure on whether to remove the requirement for offense.
All right. So Councilmember Friedson first proposed this. I agree. Is there any discussion really needed here? I'm thinking not. Okay, good. I think we're without objection.
All right, to remove.
No requirement.
Okay. All right, but now we'll see how these are connected. There was some interest in allowing the planning board to waive the screening requirement that we had in this ETA as it was proposed. That screening requirement has a 30-foot planting area and a fence required. And that was required more generally from any area visible from a residential use or a road. So that was fairly broad.
Okay. Jeff, sorry, let me just pause you for a quick sec. Why don't we ask those who are here, let's just introduce them and we'll identify their role so that council members all know who's here and the public knows who is here. I probably should have done that at the beginning. So please turn on your cameras and we'll recognize you. So I don't know if I should try to do this or not, but I see we have Jeremy Chris and Mike Scheffel from Ag, Office of Agriculture. We have Gregory Russ and Richard Weaver. Richard Weaver is the planner for this specific area.
And I will have to bow out a little early because the planning board is again reviewing and discussing another solar field today in Laytonsville near the Oaks landfill. Not in the AR zone. Not in the
AR zone, on county property, I think. Robert Cronenberg is the chief of all of the areas, right? Or in any event, you're a top guy at planning. Then we have Gregory Russ. You're in the council's office, if I recall, right? And Adriana Hochberg is the assistant chief administrative officer, and so the senior most executive branch official. And then we have. I know we had Stan Edwards. There he is. Stan knows everything, pretty much on this topic, and there are many others. And Sarah, you're going to have to remind me. I'm sorry.
I'm with Stan at DEP. I'm doing the GIS for the county executive's office.
Terrific. And Christopher McGovern is also with planning, and knows the maps and among other things. Okay, great. Thank you. So everyone is here. Council members can obviously seek guidance or comment from anybody. All right, back to where you were, Jeff. Sorry.
So is everybody okay with removing the requirement for fencing? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's just making sure.
And as long as there's not a prohibition, we're just removing the requirement, correct?
Right. We'll get to that as well in a second with the screening stuff, because the screening, as we put it in there, would require a fence. So I had proposed some differences, but Councilmember Friedson wanted to change this to a different limitation, to say that that the screening without a fence requirement should only be required within 200 feet of a neighboring house. And that is what I tried to express in that amendment on the bottom of page 3.
Okay, wait a second. So, okay, Andrew. I'm going to use first names for my colleagues. So, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple requirement. We're trying to limit whether it's required. I mean, a lot of these things can and will happen. There's a lot of agricultural needs for fences. There are other, needs once it goes through the process. But this was a way to, provide the screening requirement, 200 feet of a residential use. I mean, it's a pretty basic, simple, straightforward amendment for the committee's consideration.
Any discussion here? Without objection? All right. Oh, well.
I just want to make sure, as long as there's a waiver process, that would, which I think there is, maybe Jeff can speak to that. Again, I'm not generally against, I'm fine with it. But, I just want to make sure that natural screening and there's a waiver process. So as long as that's included, I'm good.
So that person wouldn't be required to build, to do screening.
Right.
If perhaps, what would be it? Jeff?
If they're natural screening or if there was something that was there already,
As this amendment is drafted, it does not allow the waiver. It limits where the screening is required, but doesn't give the opportunity for a waiver.
Okay, good. So would friendly amendment, I guess?
I think so. Jeff, what would that be?
Yeah, I just want to know how you would operationalize it. I mean, this isn't a high bar requirement. It's planting requirement of section 59653C8 on the sides of the facility within 200 feet of a residential requirement. You'd be, it's a planting requirement to create a natural.
Right. Let's say screening is not a fence.
Right. Screening is like planting trees.
Yeah.
Or planting shrubs or some type of arbor, having some, exactly. So, if the worst case, from my opinion, I totally appreciate where Councilmember Giwando is coming from here. If there's an existing natural buffer that can satisfy the requirement, but I guess I'd like to know how that would be operationalized. But if the worst case scenario is that we plant too many trees or too many natural buffers, I could live with that personally, but I totally get the point here of not creating a requirement that isn't necessary. So
it's not a requirement to plant screening; it's a requirement that there should be screening, right? So if it was natural screening, wouldn't that qualify, Jeff?
No, it is a plant. It is a planting requirement within that 30 feet.
It's not a buffer requirement; it's a planting requirement. So you would have to plant the trees or the shrubs or.
But if they're already present, can there just be a process for that to be? I don't know if this is a planning question, but can you just say, hey, the screening's already there naturally? Can I get a waiver from the process? That's all I'm asking. If that should seem.
I was asking if there was a way to operationalize that. I think it's a reasonable point.
I can write it in to make sure that the planning board could accept a natural vegetation.
I think we all want to achieve the same thing here. So why don't you figure out how we could do that?
All right. So
unless satisfied by existing natural buffers.
Right.
Like
something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines as that, and I would accept that as a friendly amendment and think we all are trying to achieve the same thing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Just if I can ask Rich Weaver whether he could live with that requirement and get it done at the planning board if we say screening unless the planning board finds a natural vegetative area?
I'm feverishly going through the zoning ordinance. I'm looking up to see if screening requirements are specific in the zoning ordinance.
They are.
For these uses, but the types of materials used in the screening may also be specific. So give me
park it and come back to it.
Let me look into that real quick.
No rush. Don't feel like you need to do this in real time. We can follow up on this item.
Yeah, I would just say if there's a way to satisfy Councilmember Giwando's point, I'm more than happy to satisfy it. If there isn't a way to satisfy it, and the worst case scenario here is there's a requirement to plant more natural things in the agricultural reserve, I would keep it in without the change. And if that is amenable to everybody, then hopefully we could pursue it that way.
I certainly agree with that.
Yeah, I hope we can find a way. But yes, I think I don't disagree with
I think
planting more.
Andrew's logic is inescapable. So we'll see where this ends up. But I suspect we'll find a way.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I got that message. All right. Going to page 4. As the ZTA was introduced, it required either bee-friendly or grazing-friendly plants. There was some interest in expanding that. Mira Single, our council fellow, did a lot of research and found there were a lot more plants and crops that might be able to be grown under those facilities, and there was some interest both by council members Friesen, Jawando, and Reamer to expand. So the suggested language is to include other agrivoltaic plant material. Agrivoltaic is a real thing that you can look up and look for those plants. So it is, I think, specific enough and broad enough. And again, I thank Ms. Singleton for her work here. Ms. Single.
I think that's good. I mean, it is true. This practice may evolve. There may be innovation here, and it turns out that some other types of plants grow well. I think, Evan.
Yeah, no, so picking up on what you just said, I think there certainly is an agricultural revolution taking place, and that with this amendment, and expanding those opportunities, will be the test case in some sense to see what's able to grow. But I have a more specific concern, quite frankly. What is the definition of growing? And it gets to the intention here, that if we have solar panel arrays and someone plants a simple seed and lets it wither, lets it die, is that a good college try? Does that count as planting? Does it need to actually produce and have harvest ready? So you see where I'm going. I'm just trying to make sure that there's not an easy out for planting a few seeds and never tending to them, but considering that actual farming.
Well, this would be a requirement in site planning to have real plants that do real things. Now, some of it might be fairly passive, like being pollinator friendly, which is, flowering native plants and other things. But so far as I know, when you make things a condition of site plan, planning board can go and inspect and find a violation if those plants are all dead. Rich, I'm going to point back to you again to make sure I'm not obligating the planning board to things that it doesn't do.
Yeah, this would be a requirement of being able to do it. So if you're in violation of that, you're going to have a problem. I don't know what that problem is exactly, but you're going to have a problem.
Well, and that's what I just wanted to make sure, that it was, enforceable in some way, and again, there wasn't an easy way out.
Yeah.
Well, I have Robert Cronenberg with me, but Robert, remind me, site plans are going to be enforced by the Department of Permitting Services. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. So they become conditions of approval along with the plan that gets certified after it's approved by the board, and then DPS site plan enforcement carries out all those conditions of approval for us and enforces them.
So if this comes to fruition, someone could be out and about seeing a solar field, and if they notice that there's nothing growing underneath, they would essentially call 311 or something and lodge a DPS complaint?
That's correct.
Okay.
Or they'd come through us and we would defer to DPS and they would take the initial action and hopefully follow through in terms of remediation or whatever needs to happen.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure there was enforcement there. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I will also remind everyone that a forest conservation plan would be under the authority of the planning department to do any violations of a forest conservation plan associated with the solar field or array.
All right. Hopefully anyone filing a complaint will know what the 4 seasons are as well. Craig Rice, followed by Will Juwanda.
Well, Mr. Chair, I always defer to committee members. So I'll let Mr. Juwanda.
You run a tight ship. Another reason education and culture, is my favorite committee. But
you're welcome to.
No, thank you both. I just wanted to say thank you, Agrivoltaic, for the normal folks out there. Table crops, we want to allow that, and under there and encourage it. So that, as part of our goal for the Ag Reserve. And if you can do two things at once, create clean energy and have table crops, that's a really, really good thing. So hopefully the technology advances. So I just wanted to just make that clear for the millions, as I like to say, and also just thank everyone for supporting this. I think it's good. And that's a great point, Councilmember Glass. We want to make sure it's enforced as well. Thank you.
All right. Well, Andrew wants to speak. So, Craig, you're going to have to wait another moment, according to the Craig Rice rule, which I think in this discussion, I'm happy to be more fluid here. And when you want to speak, I'll turn to you in course. Andrew.
Yeah, I'm more than happy for my good friend Craig Rice. The three of us as district council members, Craig Rice, Nancy Navarro, and I all have the great privilege and honor of representing the Agricultural Reserve, and I get to partner with Councilmember Rice quite a bit on a number of issues affecting this critical part of our community, and it's a key issue, and glad you're here and part of this discussion and been such an active part of this conversation. Just quickly on the agrivoltaic, because I think there is some confusion sometimes about what that means in terms of table crops, and there's the question of pollinators, and there is value to pollinators, and this is coming from a guy who's deathly allergic to bees, but recognizes their significant value in the natural habitats. But there's a difference between pollinating and the value that has on nature, and the need for that for agriculture, and the benefit that has, and then on the agrivoltaic and the question of basically eatable products and table crops. I'm just hoping that we could get an explanation of that so folks understand what we're doing here. I think Councilmember Juwanda was raising this same point, but I think it'd be helpful to explain the two different aspects of this. I think it's a critical part of what we want and expect as dual uses potentially, along with potential solar arrays.
If you want me to take 2 minutes, I will.
30 seconds, maybe.
30 seconds, okay. We already allow grazing, that mostly sheep that don't destroy the panels. Goats get to be a problem, but sheep are really good with this stuff. Vineyards have been planted under photocells, as well as, like you say, common table crops: tomatoes, peppers, greens, carrots, char, kale. I would hope that somebody else eats the kale, and herbs. So this type of planting is already proven on other solar facilities, and that's the type of crops you're allowing by saying agrivoltaic.
Sure, and obviously there's some limitations. The sun in many ways is blocked because the solar panels are designed to collect the sunlight, and a lot of crops require some of that sunlight, and so that has to be worked out. But this would allow for a broader, a broader collection of what can be and should be, and is hopefully would be if we pass this grown there. So thank you.
Great.
Okay.
See, it actually ended up being perfect, Mr. Chair, because now what Councilmember Friedson said perfectly aligns with what I was going to say. So one of the reasons why I signed on to this bill in the beginning is because we had this original conversation around farming underneath solar panels, the agrivoltaic issue, and it was one of the ones that I brought up as a part of the original introduction of this bill. The reality is that the technology is changing every single day, and that technology is one that is incredible in terms of harnessing more energy. So the cells themselves are getting more effective at harnessing more of the energy and allowing throughput. goes then to the crops beneath. So it's actually the technology of the solar panels themselves actually revolutionizing the way in which we're able to accomplish what it is that we're trying to do beneath those solar panels. And that's allowing for us to look at a variety of different other kinds of crops that may also potentially be able to grow beyond what currently is there. And so I think that the flexibility is incredibly important because the technology continues to advance. And so from that perspective, having a more wide definition of what it is that we have able to grow underneath is going to continue to evolve as we see the technology continue to increase. And so just again, as Councilmember Giwando said, for the millions that are watching at home, for how best to describe this in layperson terms, it's the same as a car getting better gas mileage. And so essentially, as this photovoltaic cell gets more better gas mileage, it doesn't have to have it all captured in the cell and can have more go through to the plants, which means that even plants that are greedier when it comes to needing more sunlight can actually still be under them. Now, again, this is evolving technology. It has not been, it's been done in tests and pilots, but it could potentially be really a revolutionizer for what it is that we're looking to do in supporting having the two coexist. And so I just wanted to put that out there and just say that, again, more flexibility is definitely going to be better as we see that technology continue to evolve.
Good. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we're seeing the opportunity here change. It's evolving, as you said, and farming and solar can coexist and complement one another. I think that is certainly has been my belief, and I think that is becoming more and more demonstrated. So thank you for that. All right, we are on item 4 of 28. So we're moving to item 5 of 28. So
we should probably restrict our comments to the controversial ones, I'm guessing, and not just talk about things we all agree on, I bet.
Exactly. When we know we agree, let's move.
Like a third of these today.
Thank you. Thank you to the co-chair. All right, Jeff. Let's go.
Just saying.
No, you're right. Thank you.
I'm sure you're all very busy.
Need that.
Moving along, we're trying to think a little bit about failure, or what happens after a solar array ends its useful life. And one of the horror stories that is out there that really occurred was a landowner stripped the property of all topsoil and then put on solar, so that land will never be used for agriculture for, let's say, the next 500 years. So there was an ask by a couple of council members, Councilmember Friedson and Giwando, to specifically have a prohibition that the site of solar has not and will not strip the topsoil. So that's one aspect of returning it to agriculture. The other aspect is a request for a bonding requirement to have the funds to return the soil, return back to commodity agriculture. Zoning doesn't do bonding. It's not with something within zoning power. So if the Joint Committee would like this, I'll have to redraft it as a bill that amends Chapter 8.
I have concerns about this one. I don't know that we should. I think we should return to this issue later if people really want to pursue it. But this seems like a potential rabbit hole. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying this is a complicated issue.
I agree with those comments that I'm unsure of the application of this. I understand absolutely the intent, but just like how homes contract with Solar City or any of those other solar companies, isn't that part of the negotiation process? Don't you know the life of the hardware and that what will happen at the end of that contract? I mean, wouldn't this be the same case for whatever landowner would want to enter into such an agreement?
I think these contracts all have terms to them, but of course, the reason you would, as a government, want to get into those terms is in case of bankruptcy. What if that provider could not perform and did not exist anymore? Then you want to make sure that it isn't public funds or anybody else's funds that has to come in and clean up the site.
Okay.
I was going to, continuing with my thought, and I'll yield back after this, but do such protections exist for residential solar on roofs?
No.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good point. I mean, there's an asset there. Okay, Andrew, I think Will's next. Will's next, then Andrew. I really would like to come back to this issue later. This is a complicated one. I don't think it's one of the big issues that I would like to at least get through as many of the big issues as we can.
Okay, so I'm just unclear on, I mean, you said you don't want to move forward with it, but you want to come back. I'm happy to come back to it.
I'm saying let's not discuss this right now. I honestly, I think we all would want to get a little better educated about this. So I propose we come back to it.
If I could just say briefly, we want to make sure that it's returned to use. The solar companies I've spoken to are fine with the bonding. So I don't think it's as controversial as we think or complicated, but I'm happy to return to it. It's an important issue for me, that we need to address before we dispose of the bill. That's all I'll say.
Okay, but I do want to say I strongly support the language about not scraping topsoil. Like, that is essential.
Yeah.
It's just this specific issue about the bonding. It could be fine. I haven't had a chance to explore it. Sorry. Andrew.
Yeah, twofold. One, I do think this is different than a solar array on a rooftop because the house is still a house if the solar panel goes out of use, but the agriculture is different and is limited based on a bankruptcy occurring and some issue, and the whole purpose here is to maintain the integrity long-term of the agricultural use of the AR zone. I think this is a discussion we should have separately. I agree. I don't think this is controversial as some have suggested, although we do have to figure out what it looks like. And that's, the devil is in the details of what the appropriate amount is that isn't intended to make it prohibitively expensive, that protects against the issue. I think that we do need to have a separate conversation for that. It should happen alongside as the council is, still taking up this particular issue. And I just wanted to note that I am supportive of that conversation and the overall concept, although we do have a lot to figure out in terms of, what the number is and what the appropriate level is and how do we operationalize that in a reasonable way. I do think it's quite different from a rooftop solar. Okay. Separately from that, it was unclear to me because I see these as two separate issues. I mean, they're, I guess, moderately related, but the scraping issue, which is a significant amendment that I put forward in my memo, and is one that I know there's a lot of support for. So I just want to make sure that we
let's move forward with that, right? Okay. And then let's come back to the bonding issue.
Okay.
And it's probably fine. We'll want to do some detail. I mean, I think it sounds like something I'll support, but we're going to need some details there. So.
Yeah. Are we talking concrete? Are we going to go to that?
That's where I was going to go because that's in the same category of being able to return it to farming. I think it was Councilmember Jawando who said.
I'm sorry. Before we go into this, can we clarify? I mean, again, these are related, but they are potentially separate issues. Can we?
I think without
objection, agree upon the scraping issue, which I think there's widespread support. And then there's some nuances, I believe, on the concrete, although I think there's, support on that too. Can we do one and then the next one? I mean, we seem to be conflating issues here, and I'm getting a little bit confused of following each individual issue, if that's okay.
You're right. So we agree on this no scraping. I think there's committee consensus on that. This other issue of bonding, it sounds like Jeff is saying it would be legislation, wouldn't be in the ZTA. So we don't need to continue that in this ZTA discussion, look, we can take that up separately.
Yes.
All right. Resolved. Thank you.
Now, the other thing that we were starting to talk about is prohibiting concrete. And the reason for that, of course, is to make it easier to return the conditions on the land back to commodity farming, and provide more area for planting underneath the cells as well. So I think Councilmember Giwando proposed prohibiting concrete. That might be a little over the top because there are pads that are needed for transformers and
How about
other
a
equipment.
friendly amendment here that unless required by the zoning code, by the permitting by DPS, would that?
Well, I was going to suggest that after speaking with the folks that do this, that you just limit it to, or have a waiver, or not require it rather, where there's transformers and other electrical equipment, including the panels. Because that's the only limited areas where my understanding is that they would need to use concrete.
Tom, did you want to make a comment here?
To be clear, they would need to use concrete where the panels are, correct? That's what you mean?
No.
Not under
There's
the
a transformer that's the issue with the concrete,
Transformer.
from my understanding from the industry.
And there's some,
not the panels.
right.
There's
There's some equipment there's maybe a box,
Sure.
in very limited. There's
It's
some
limited but necessary, and so we need to make sure that that we appropriately
Panels
have it
go
be
in.
limited and allowed, but only when necessary.
Exactly.
Can we find that balance?
We can use only when necessary, but it wouldn't be in the whatever you said permitting to begin with. It's you're claiming there's no need for concrete with panels?
Correct.
And that's what I understand as well. That they
all developers? That
that
surprises me.
the
I'm
posts
saying to use the sticks, the
are
posts.
just driven right into the ground with no concrete. That's what I'm told. But that there may be some
Right.
parts of the code, like the electrical code, essentially, that would require a small concrete,
Yeah.
Right.
footer under
Yeah.
the panel
Yeah.
box or something. And so that was why I was saying unless required by the code, but
What I would like to suggest again is transformers and other electrical equipment. I think that would cover it, from my understanding from industry, and that they do not, but not panels, not including panels.
I think that's fine. We can just
When you say industry, that's SIA or one individual developer?
No, the collective group. Yeah.
Great.
See, yeah.
Okay.
We can. It's going to come before the full council. I'm just.
I mean,
That's
these
fine.
are-
We can defer it till full council. It's surprising. We just put up a treehouse and we had to put up concrete. It happens with tetherball or a basketball hoop. So unless you want it to fall down,
you often put it.
for
They're
sure.
not. They're not
Unless you
using
want it to
the-
fall down, and I know none of the neighbors wanted the panels to fall down a year or two either,
Right.
or after a rainstorm. So I would just be careful here and defer to the engineers.
Absolutely. I think I'll turn to Craig in a second here. My understanding is that this is generally fine, and so we will. We're not going to finish today, so we'll circle back on this. But I think tentatively we could say that's fine. Craig, followed by Andrew.
So I just wanted to add, Tom, that we've actually looked at it for our own house, and so what they do is they actually do ballast blocks. So they're blocks that are on top, so you're not actually laying concrete. So yeah, you're killing the grass, I guess, to some extent, but there are blocks of concrete. So it's kind of like think of your standard in terms of your patio umbrella that has the cement blocks that hold it down. It's the same sort, right? Exactly. So those are options that are there that can do the same exact thing.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I've had lots of conversations with industry representatives and folks who are involved. They seem to not have an issue as long as it is appropriately not exclusively prohibited, because there are certain circumstances, although they acknowledge and agree, limiting of concrete. It's not something that they do as a best practice anyway with the panels themselves, but there are specific needs for concrete in certain circumstances within the larger development, and we don't want to put something in place that was intended for something else that is not what I believe the Councilmember Jawando's intention is here. And so if we can find a way to thread that needle, I think I'd be in full support of that.
Sounds good.
I think we're on the same page. All right.
Okay.
Keep moving.
Moving on. Avoid scenic easements in or near rustic roads or in general. The rustic road master plan identified a whole slew of roads in the western part of the county, a little bit north as well. I did put the map in the packet. The rustic road master plan actually shows a road and then points arrows as to where the scenic views are. It doesn't give a dimension, but gives a general orientation from the road and where you can find the view that it's protecting. It depends what you want to do here. If you wanted to really take care of this, you would say the site is not visible from a scenic view identified in the Rustic Roads Master Plan. Or you could leave it to the planning board's discretion on being compatible with its neighbors. There is some language right now in a finding for the site plan that it needs some general compatibility. But if you want to go further, that's how it would be.
All right. So we have, Councilmember Jawando has put this forward. I want to say I strongly oppose this one. I don't know if you want to move forward with it or not. If you don't want
I
to
didn't put it forward. This is not mine. Yeah.
Okay, so nobody has suggested this.
I believe the county executive suggested this, but no council member has put it forward. Just to clarify.
Thank you.
And I'm not supportive of it either.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right.
Without a sponsor.
Keep moving.
All right, keep moving. This one's a little bit more complicated on limit to farmer-owned land. Remember about everybody who testified was on the farming community side was fearing higher rents and being priced out of the market. And to me, this also relates to whether you want to have only a percentage of a lot to be used for a solar facility. But I think it was Councilmember Jawando who recommended a maximum of 20% of the total site. I think it was. So I have to say we've looked at numbers. There's about, now I got to remember it's either 20,000 or 30,000 acres that would be removed by making sure that you had to be more than 50 acres, which is what this would amount to for a maximum size site. But it also goes in the direction of making sure that this is more incidental to farming on the site.
Okay, so I'm not sure if a council member has proposed this or not. I will turn to Will.
Yeah.
He's asked to speak.
I did this one. I did propose. The last one I did not. But I won't bury the lead. I'm gonna withdraw this amendment because I think we can address it when we get to the soil conversation and other conversations. But I do want to say briefly that this is just intended, like many of these amendments, to ensure that farmers who are leasing the land aren't priced off by solar, and that the primary function of the AR zone is farming, and that was the intent here. But I think we can approach it and get to that from a different way without limiting the very important purpose of greening the grid. So I will withdraw this amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can keep moving then. So now we're on number 8, is that right?
We're on number 8, yes. I described at your last meeting the fact that 2 megawatt and facilities and more are already governed by the Public Utilities Commission, and they actually preempt all zoning when the Public Service Commission grants a license to one of these utility-size facilities. I had in the ZTA as it was produced, the language just acknowledged the fact that the zoning is preempted by the Public Service Commission. The current language says you treat that type of facility as if it were a public utility under the zoning code. We got comments in text that it's better to keep the current language because at least that gives the PSC something to refer to, since the PSC has to at least consult the local zoning action before taking action. So at least the prior language gave it some basis for some consultation. I end up agreeing with reverting the language back to the current code.
Okay, so I'm a little unclear. I mean, first of all, it seems immaterial. The PSC is going to do whatever it wants to do. But if I agree with you, is there an amendment that's needed or not?
Yes, it takes out language that's in the code in the proposed CTA. The way it currently reads is a system designed to produce more than 2 megawatts may be allowed as a public utility under section 3.67E. That's how it currently reads. So, on the amended language would make it read as, if licensed by the Public Service Commission, a system designed to produce more than 2 megawatts is not restricted by Chapter 59.
All right, so I'll move that. I'm fine with that. Councilmember Andrew.
Yeah, I support this. I think we should have our own zoning code. We don't need to reference the PSC or do their work for them or clarify it for them. And so, let's keep the language as it currently stands within the zoning code. I support this. And, if there's a need for a second, I'll second it.
I think this looks like a without objection. Yep.
Okay. All right. So now we're on accessory solar. Right now we have a limit of 120% of on-site use is an accessory use. Accessory uses do not require site plan approval. The limits in state law for net metering is to say 200% of on-site power usage can be take advantage of net metering. So we had testimony to expand this to 200 by Councilmember Friedson, Jawando, and Reamer.
I think it makes perfect sense. I think we have riotous agreement here. All right. Very good. Without objection.
All right. Now we have a raging debate mostly between the executive and the planning board on whether to characterize these non-accessory uses as an accessory or a principal use. To me, it's defined sufficiently as an allowed limited use. And I don't think we need to go further than saying that.
So I support council staff on this in their interpretation of how they've written this. So unless somebody wants to propose something different. Okay, Will?
I just want to, I generally am supportive of it. I think we can consider this in the soil conversation, but so I think I'm fine with moving past it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think we're going to rely on our council staff, which is our zoning attorneys. So thank you.
Okay. should monitor the 1,800 acre limit. As introduced, the ZTA would have Department of Permitting Services do the monitoring. They brought to my attention the fact that the only thing they see at DPS is an electrical permit. They don't see a normal structure building permit, so they don't generally have acreage, and it would be difficult for them to split that out. The planning department, on the other hand, reviews the site plans, and what we're counting toward this 1,800 limit is only those things that have site plan approval. So it makes more sense to change the who monitors to the planning board.
Okay. Seems reasonable. All right.
Okay.
Don't see any concerns raised, so we'll keep going.
All right, now we're on geography. We're on the where question of restrictions based on something. And let me maximize my screen a bit so I can see this. I'm going to turn this over to Chris McGovern, and hopefully he could be able to share his screen on going through a lot of GIS work. The first thing I have to say is, even before you put in other legislative changes, there's a ton of stuff where solar can't go, a ton of areas where solar can't go, based on other laws, based on other policies, based on ownership. You're not going to do this stuff on parks. You're not going to do this where there's a legal prohibition because of a sold agricultural easements. Those would be all of the publicly paid for, not all of the public, it would be the paid for easements, AEP, MALF, those specifically would not allow this.
State public easements.
Excuse me?
State public easements, correct?
I didn't catch the first word.
He said state public easements.
Well, state easements are MALF. It's a MALF program. I think we buy into that, but Jeremy could correct me, but that easement just prohibits this use. So you can't go there. The other thing that is prohibited here by the ZTA as introduced is taking down any trees. Forest land is out of bounds. So you're really limited more on where you can go. Now, again, I'll turn it over to Chris, and he could explain all that. But within the ZTA, removal of trees or landscaping is prohibited. So it takes out all the forest land. But Chris, are you ready to go?
Jeremy, did you want to make a comment there? Jeremy, Chris.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Jeremy Chris, Office of Agriculture. As it relates to easements that are publicly funded, we have both county and state easements. And the way the easements are written, commercial uses like solar would be prohibited unless, of course, it's accessory solar, which Mike and I showed you last Thursday several examples of properties that are already encumbered by county and state easements that the accessory solar is allowed, and you saw for yourself how they look. But when you have farms that are under the MALF, the AEP, the Rural Legacy, those are the county and state programs that would prohibit commercial uses for large-scale solar.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
So should I share my screen? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris, are you in a position to share your screen, McGovern? There you go.
Yes, I believe am I sharing the right one? Let me try that again. So, I'm sorry, just let me try this one more time.
while he's talking, I'll just say that when you take all these mandatory exclusions, you start with 101,000 acres, and it reduces it immediately to 45,000 acres. Right. So even before you get to any other exclusions, that's what it would do.
Are you able to see my screen now?
I am.
Okay, good. So here is the entire ag reserve, and I've clicked on it, and it's actually 106,000 acres when you include Potomac River. So this is where we start from. But, you know, as Jeff mentioned, we worked with council staff, and so we decided to remove, as a starting point for this calculator, all the parks that are in the AR. These are the forests in the AR, and the agricultural easements. And I will mention that these agricultural easements are the MALPs, the AEPs, and the Rural Legacy Program easements. So I believe that's not just state. It's also one of the county ones. So when you take all of these easements out, and this is, again, the light green is what's left from that, that is what gets us to the 40, nets us down to the 45,000 acres that Jeff had just mentioned. Now, the way that this calculator works is that I cut those guys out, and then this is the tool, this is the layer that operates on these toggles. This is the layer that represents, and it's a little slow coming in, that represents those 45,000 acres left over after forest parks, the Potomac River, and the ag easements. So
this, Chris, just not to cut you off, this is what could be utilized potentially. This is what's left over.
Well, if you don't imply any other restrictions, this would
be right.
Right,
that's what I'm saying. You just starting from the beginning. Okay.
As introduced.
So here you can see I'm just toggling the ag easements, and you can see that they're removed again with the forests and the parks. In some of these areas, like over here in Dickerson, is actually just not AR zone. But so okay, so this is the sum all be all of what's left, the 45,000. Now, before I start going through these toggles, including especially the soils ones, I'll just show a couple of these other things that the toggles use. Like, for instance, this is the electrical proximity. We're using 2 miles from any substations and a half-mile buffer around the transmission lines. It's actually a pretty substantial area. This is the BGE service areas. And just get that a little more bold. So obviously, anything in PEPCO would serve most of the population. When I mentioned that 46,000 square foot net scenario of what's left where we're starting, this is how the breakdown of how much of that 45,000 acres is within these 3 utility regions. We start with 11,000 and change in PEPCO, and majorities in Potomac Edison. So we also have BLTs. The way this is working is we have a centroid at the property who has the BLT. This particular one has 4 BLTs. Each BLT is 25 acres, and so we're using just the circle, which it goes to 25. This one would be 4 times 25, 100 acres. Skipping the soils for a moment. Well, actually, no, the soils are next. So the soils. I had built a previous demo and an analysis for Jeff, and it used a different definition. So I wanted to just quickly go over what that is. In this about panel here, I have a link to the soil survey that the executive branch and my team used. And so this is the soil manual for Montgomery County from the USDA. And the relevant point here is that there's a soil map that covers the entire county. There's hundreds of classes of soils, and they have a few tables at the back. On table 5, these are the categories that are prime farmland. And on table 6, you see these are all the categories. These little 1B, 1C, 2A, these are all the soil categories in the county, and each of them is given a land capability of 2 or 3 or 1. It goes 1 through 8. Now, of all of those different soils, only these ones are considered to be prime farmland. All of the ones that are prime farmland are categories 1, 2, or 3. However, every soil that is category 1, 2, or 3 is not necessarily prime farmland because of drainage or slopes or things like that. Now, so this is the I have multiple toggles here that will work with either definition, so that we can see, we can cut that remaining 45,000 up by any number of these different versions of the soil classifications that you guys decide to use. Now, before we do that, let's just look at them. Here are all of the soils in Montgomery County that are Category 1. And here are all the soils in Montgomery County that are Category 2. And pretty much fill in the rest of Category 3.
That's not actually all of Montgomery County, though. It's only all of the Ag Reserve, right?
That's a good point. Yes, what I'm showing here are just the Category 1, 2, and 3 that are within the AR, the Ag Reserve.
I would like to see it throughout the whole county at some point. I don't know that we have to do it yet.
I don't have it handy, but they extend pretty much all the way through the county at almost the same concentration.
That's the point I want to make here about Category 2. A lot of suburban Montgomery County is also Category 2. The backyards of numerous communities that were developed are Category 2. So, I think that tells you something as to what removing Category 2 soil means, how much you have to remove. And if this was a state policy, which it's advocated for, many people advocate that Category 2 would be the state restriction. You are really removing, a massive amount of land from use, and you're removing land that is, not different from a lot of our backyard. So I think it's relevant to look at this as how much land do you want to be available, and not necessarily magical soil here. It's just how much of the Ag Reserve do you want to be available. And the Class 1 is clearly a more restricted, and there's something, more unique about it. But Class 2 is common soil. Mm-hmm.
Well, so I have also this little layer here, which is what's left in the Ag Reserve if you took out all of 1, 2, and 3. And so just to give you a little idea as to...
And how much is that?
I don't have that number handy, I'm sorry.
As you can see, it's, I think you'd have trouble assembling parcels from
when
that.
we get to the toggles, we'll be able to get to that. And I just remembered, though, that Category 1, 2, and 3 takes up, I have a statistic that including the entire Ag Reserve, just minus the water bodies, which is a little over 100,000 acres, Category 1, 2, and 3 would remove 80% of that. So I don't have the specific number if we also remove the parks and the forests stuff.
And just to the point that you raised before, though, that Category 1, 2, and 3 is a broader category than prime soils, because everything in prime soils is within 1, 2, and 3, but not all of 1, 2, and 3 are prime soils. We got a square rectangle situation here.
That's right.
Do you have the same statistic that you just shared related to prime soils?
So here are the prime soils, and given as the entire land base of Ag Reserve, including forests and parks, this only removes roughly 37% of that 102,000 acres.
So, category 1 and 2, or excuse me, prime soils is 37% instead of category 1, 2, and 3 is 80%. That's the comparison there.
Yes.
Can you zoom in?
That's the USDA prime.
USDA prime is making me hungry.
I know. Pun intended.
Yeah, I just want to note the fact that, I mean, I learned this yesterday. I mean, it just shows, I think we're moving very quickly on this. I'm trying to learn as best as I can. The category 1 and 2, at least my intention was to try to get to a compromise where we were protecting the most important land for agriculture. And that's where 1 and 2, at least what I put forward, I know others have put forward for similar reasons, I believe. Prime, which is something that has been focused on, I was understanding prime as 1, 2, and 3. But the compromise of 1 and 2 may not have been what I had, hoped for. And prime, prohibiting prime agriculture may be a better mechanism to protect the most important soil for agriculture. So I just wanted to raise that because this is, I think the point that was just made is a very important point, and it has an impact on one of the amendments that I put forward based on the intention for why I put it forward.
So prime, I guess, is somewhere in between, including 1 and including, well, it's closer to 2 than 1 is not a very large category, admittedly so, but
it's basically around the water there.
So let's try toggling off some of these and seeing how the net effect works.
Yeah, let's go through all the restrictions, and then we'll also layer the soil on it.
So I turned on the BLT just so you can see that when I remove the BLTs, the green is sliced and diced in all these different ways, and so it allows us to toggle these things off piece by piece. So if we toggle off the BLTs.
Could you back out a little bit so we can see the whole ag reserve again?
Sure.
Or at least back out a little.
I'm hesitant. I'm just a little hesitant because it goes slower if you go out, but we'll do that. So just for reference sake, though, it went from 45,000 and change to 44,000 and change when I removed the BLTs.
Share those numbers again. I'm sorry.
It started out at 45,600-ish thousand acres, and when I removed BLTs, it went down to 44,151. It removed a little over 1,000. Now, if we also remove the stream valley buffers, it's going to take a moment to regenerate, but you'll start to see little worm-like gaps in the green now, over here, all over the place, really. And so we were at 41,000, I believe, and now we're at 34,600,000. And we can do the same thing with steep slopes.
Can I ask you not to remove BLTs, because I don't know where we are on that one yet, but I think there's general consensus around stream buffers, slopes. Start off with those things where we think that there's generally consensus, so we know what our starting point is.
And again, without any action, the planning board would keep things out of stream buffers by being in compliance with their environmental guidelines.
Right. I know Craig wants to speak. We will turn to him.
So let's remove all of the category 1, 2, and 3s. So we're starting at 33,400. And now we're down to 19,600. Now, if we went with just prime soils, instead of, I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong one. These are only the category 1 and 2 prime soils. The one up here is this is all of the prime soils.
So hold on. The one you just had up was if you removed 1 and 2, you're left with 19,616.
No, it's more complicated than that. It's you remember prime soils, which is the very least restrictive.
Sure.
Has some category 1, 2, and 3s. When I check this one, it will only remove the 1 and 2 that are also prime.
Got it.
This one here, when we get to that, will remove all 1s and all 2s.
Okay.
But when we remove all prime soils, we go from, I'm going to undo it again. I lost track of where we started. So we were, with just the ones we agree at the top, we're at 33,400. If I remove all prime soils, we go from 33,000 down to 16,800.
That is 16.8. So of the entire 100,000, 90,000 ag reserve, you're left with 16,817 if you remove prime soils. Can you zoom in? And I'm going to just say to Craig, jump in at the time that you feel it is appropriate.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Can you zoom in, in an area? I want to say my concern about this. I mean, first of all, I think this kills it. I think personally, but if you want to assemble a parcel to do this on, you have to have contiguous acreage to do it, and you can see that it becomes difficult to organize the land to meet this.
So this will be all category 1, 2, 3 now. And this lump is our landfill, which is considered category 8, so that's left over. But that brings us, if we just do all the category 3s, we're down to just about 3,000.
Okay, so I don't think anybody wants to remove all category 1, 2, and 3. I think we can.
Yeah.
So. I think so. Let's move to category 1 and 2. I also don't know that anybody any longer wants to do that from comments that I'm hearing.
And that's 13,500.
So again, I always want to say on this, so 13,500 acres of the ag reserve, how many of those acres are owned by somebody who actually wants to do this? And then what do you, and can?
Could we just get clarity? Sorry, I took down 16,800 mentally on if you prohibit prime, and then I just heard 13,500 if you prohibit prime, and I'm
sorry, the 13,500 is all category 1 and all category 2.
Okay, so if we did 1 and 2, which is the proposal put forward, that would be 13,500. If you did prime, which would be the most important within 1, 2, and 3, it would include some of category 3 also. That would be 16,800. Okay. And I misheard you, so I just wanted to clarify that. Sorry. Thank you.
And then to Councilmember Reamer's point, can we see the land, the parcels, the scale here is a little, I want to make sure I understand the scale of when you scroll over, how many of these parcels what's the size of those green parcels so to the contiguous land point,
Well, that goes to these toggles here. I should have added the parcels themselves so you can physically see them. But this little chunk of green right here is on a parcel that is less than 50 acres. And so,
but you don't know how much. You don't know how much less. You just have less than 50 and less than 100.
I have 50 to 100 and then over 100 categories on these little guys.
Okay.
So this one is 100. This is part of a 100+ acre parcel right here.
I want to just observe from my colleagues. Like, I felt that the way to address this issue was through the cap on acreage. That when you start to add in all of these other filters, you turn this into a needle in a haystack mission for the providers to find somebody who wants to do it. And that we should best focus on how much acreage are we comfortable with? Certainly remove prime 1, recognizing that's not a significant exclusion, but these issues will just have to sort themselves out. How much acreage are we comfortable with? And then allow as much flexibility as we can within that overall acreage cap. And it seemed to me to be the best way to protect prime soils, or whatever interest that you have. You know, you're setting a limit on what this can be, and then it's a better way to. I think the goal of setting the limit is we actually want that much. You know, we want 1,800 acres of solar fields to be constructed so that we can meet our energy goals. If we're really trying to chop it down in ways that make it threading a needle or a needle in a haystack to find the sites, we're really not going to get sites. And so,
but I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but a couple of things. One is, just by setting a cap indiscriminately does not differentiate between what is the most important farmland and what is not. And I think it's important that we not forget that this is the agricultural reserve, which is intended for agriculture. And so, I do think we have to be thoughtful and mindful about that. The second piece is when it comes to the 1,800 acres. I mean, as far as I'm aware, currently there are about 186 acres that would be available within the hosting capacity as currently exists. I understand that may be subject to change, but we're not currently anywhere close to, even if we allowed this to occur anywhere in the agricultural reserve, to reach the 1,800 acres under the constraints and confines set forth from the PSC. So, the question becomes not just how much do we want, but where do we want it, and what impact are we willing to accept for it to have? I mean, the whole idea of environmental activism and advocacy is understanding that everything that we do has a consequence, and we have to make choices. So, I think we ought to have this discussion and figure out where we land. I personally would be very uncomfortable moving forward without a prohibition on either prime farmland or on categories 1 and 2 as I had originally proposed. But as I mentioned earlier, based on the information as I now understand it, prime farmland may be a more appropriate and better prohibition, and I'd be willing to have that conversation. I think we ought to discuss it based on where other members of the joint committees are, and I also would like, I know Councilmember Rice is here and wanted to weigh in as well, and I'd be interested to hear his views since we share the largest portion of agricultural reserves in our respective districts.
I did want to make a comment on that. Your at-large council members also represent the Ag Reserve.
All of it.
All of it. We got more of it than you, my friend.
It wasn't a comparison. I was just noting that the Councilmember Rice and I in our districts do that. I'm not here for a competition, but I appreciate the point, and I take it to heart.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Councilmember Friedson. And let me just say this. Look, I think we're facing a false dichotomy here. One in which we need to have solar, and we can't have solar if we protect farmland, and we can't have and protect farmland if we want to have solar. We can do both. And I think, and that was the overall spirit of the reason why I signed on to this bill to begin with, because the idea was, in areas that we know that farmers have on their land that isn't productive, that isn't going to do anything else, it's a prime opportunity to contribute overall to try and meet our clean energy goals. And so from that perspective, Councilmember Rimmer, to your point, it is going to be difficult in some respects, right? To try and piece together some of those tracks. But that's important. It's important that we still protect the overall goal of what it is, because we have other laudable goals that we don't put over and in front of the agricultural reserve. We have affordable housing that's a huge crisis, but we don't have any of us saying that we're opening up affordable housing to the ag reserve, understanding even on lands that aren't prime, that somehow we would start to develop in those areas. We're not saying that. So I think we have to be very careful about the messaging in which we put forth that says that, yes, indeed, in areas where we do not see the future for us in terms of farming and working that land to the benefit of us when it comes to addressing our food insecurity, as well as to continue to address our climate emergency that we have. Because I will just say this, that farming and planting food is also contributing to a better environment for us, right? Let's just be real about that as well. The more that we can grow locally, the more we reduce carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, all of those kinds of things. So let's not forget about that as well. And that's a contributing factor to our overall goals also. But putting that aside, I think that there is a way in which when we look at prime soils and we avoid those as a primary source of where we're going to put these solar fields and solar arrays, that makes the most sense in terms of addressing both priorities, both. And I want to make sure that that's very clear from my perspective. I've always said that we need to protect and encourage and support more farming in our ag reserve, not less, not the same, more, right? And so that means that there may be some creative ways in which we're addressing some of these soils to actually bring them to other levels. And we've seen some of that being done in a lot of areas, not just in the ag reserve, but in the county as a whole. So there's even future potential for some of those soils that aren't the greatest to get them to that level as we try and meet our food needs. And at the same time, we can also ensure that those areas that we have pretty much all agreed are not areas where even with as much mitigation as we possibly can put forward, it's not going to happen. Those are areas in which we can set aside to make sure that we're contributing to helping our grid get greener. And so that's kind of my take on this. I think that there is a compromise position in the middle. I think that what you heard from Councilmember Friedson and Councilmember Giwando is pretty much along the lines where I find myself in associating with prime soils. I'd love to hear from Jeremy Chris, while I consider myself to be a little bit in tune with farming because I'm right on the edge of our ag reserve. I'd also like to hear their thoughts as well to help shape this discussion about what it is that prime soils truly mean when it comes to the future of farming.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear from Jeremy in a moment. I'd like to just continue with this map here. Can you go to the western side, scroll over, and I think the key issue here is your ability to put together 15 acres for a community solar operation. And if you have a 100-acre farm or a 50-acre farm, the average size of an average farm in the county is 50 acres. If you have one of these, but prime soil, is sort of scattered or cuts across your property in all kinds of different ways, it's going to be very difficult to actually put together the acreage. So let's talk about the mandatory exclusions. So that's the stream buffer, the slopes.
Hans?
Oh, Evan.
Real quick. So while we're on this map, I want to better understand it. The blue that we're looking at, those are the energy, right? That's essentially the power grid.
That is what I guess is the radius from power stations. Correct.
Right. So do any of so as I'm understanding this, the installations would then need to be within this proximity, correct?
It's not a need, it's a matter of economics. It's cheaper to go where you have to run the least wire. There's more capacity right at the substation than there are on the lines that run along the street. So it's where these circles are where the facilities are most likely to go.
Okay.
Can I interject something here?
Yeah, go ahead, Stan.
Yeah, Stan Everett from Environmental Protection. I want to point out that yesterday, or last time we talked, the folks from Ag pointed out that Cherry Glen Goat Farm, which has a solar installation right now, an accessory use solar installation, it does not fall within these blue areas. So I think we need to do a little work on the
Yeah.
area in which you can install a solar installation.
I don't think right. I don't know that this particular layer is helpful.
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand, because according to this, it has limited it to 9,000 acres. So, okay.
Why don't we unclick this layer? My understanding is that it's distribution lines.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, I mean, we might not even be right about this, but this is an economic condition. And economic conditions change. And sometimes, particularly in a fast evolving industry like this one, they change fairly rapidly. And so, we're zoning. Zoning is yes, you can amend zoning as we are proving here today, but zoning is intended to endure. And so, I do think it's important that when we discuss this, that we understand that, we're trying to understand what the practical realities of the circumstances are. And so, as a discussion point, it makes sense, but we also have to understand that, there's nothing permanent, or, the forestation issues and the stream valley issues and the slope issues are as close to permanent as it gets, without, I guess, technically being permanent. But the distance from a transmission station and whether or not it's economically viable to have a solar array within it is a moving target. It might be right now, it might not even be, based on what we just heard from somebody who knows a lot more about these issues than I do. But I just think it's important that all these things that we're talking about are not created equally, and they're not conditions that are the same.
Although I think my colleague would also agree that enacting a zoning ordinance without thinking about the impact on business or the economics of it is not something we should do either.
Could I just chime in briefly, Hans?
Yeah.
So I think a couple things are important to understand with this map. I know we backed way out now, but right now we're at the 16,800 acres that is the prime lands excluded, which I agree is a better approach than the one that I was also exploring, the 1 and 2. I think this would be slightly better. I think two critical things I wanted to mention. One is I need to understand, I think it'd be helpful for all of us to understand, what is the land mass, how many lots, and I know I've heard this number before, maybe someone knows it, that's of the many people who are on this Zoom. In this 16,817, how many 15-acre plus contiguous land masses are there that privately owned? I think that number needs to be stated, because it's hard to tell exactly how big these plots are. We just know that they're 50 or less, and there's a lot between 15 and 50. That's one thing. The second thing, to Hans's point about, well, there might be some prime land that abuts or is on the same property, and if you just had a little bit more of that, you could pull it together. Jeff in the packet mentions an option of, okay, we allow for 5 to 10% of prime usage, and I think I'm characterizing it right, if, as an allowable use, if that would help bring the whole thing together, but it doesn't, again, totally flip the usage of the land away from agriculture. That's something I think we need to understand as well. And I don't know if we're going to be able to understand that today from this map with these numbers, but I think it's something important to consider.
Sure. I mean, I want to, again, reiterate, I think the best way to deal with this is to limit the amount of acreage of the whole ag reserve. We are also ensuring that there will continue to be agricultural use underneath the panels, and that could improve and grow over time. So I think it is compatible with farming. And
to that, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I was just going to say, to that point, I mean, Councilman Friesen brought this up about the number of 1,800 just being not really a real number because of all the other the usages. So are you another thing that we could lower that number to mitigate that concern as well, and bring that down to 1,200 or so.
We'll see where people are at, but at 1,800 acres, we calculate that that's enough to meet the average annual consumption of about 55,000 homes. That makes a very significant impact on our consumption of energy on the grid.
Right.
And I think it has a very big impact from an environmental perspective, and I think from a concern about agriculture, I think it has a very, very small effect. And I think that fighting climate change is also in the interests of people who love agriculture. You know, I think farmers need us to solve the climate crisis just as badly as anybody else does. And I think that's really the problem that we're confronting here, which is there's no solution that we can do faster than cleaning up the grid, shutting down coal and gas and oil sources of power generation, replacing them with solar and wind. There is nothing we can do that's faster in its scale and that's going to have a bigger impact than decarbonizing the electric grid. We can talk all we want about getting people to stop driving and, you know, the gradual replacement of new buildings from old buildings, you know, replacing old buildings with new buildings from the code. That's all a multi-decade strategy. It's a long-term strategy. The only truly short-term strategy that humanity has is to green up the grid. And we've got to be fighting this with the kind of vision and conviction that we fought World War II. You know, this is to save humanity. And so allowing solar in a very limited capacity, 1,800 acres of a 90,000 acre plus ag reserve without making it impossible. You know, removing prime soils will make it, in my view, functionally. I don't know what the actual acreage of deployment will be under that. I would be very pessimistic about it. I think it would be a minor policy to create clean energy. And it would take something that is an opportunity to do something big, and it would filter it down to something that, you know, doesn't make much of a difference. And I think we are called to do more. And again, I want to reiterate, I mean, nobody wants to have to, you know, everybody would like everybody else to solve the problem. I think we all have to solve the problem. Farmers have to solve the problem. Suburban homeowners have to solve the problem. Urban residents have to solve the problem. We all have to give up something for the greater good. And this is the nearest, most effective, most at scale, you know, opportunity that we have. I think this is certainly going to be the proposal before this county council of these 4 years that would have the clearest and most significant direct impact. So, you know, I think that to my colleagues, you know, comment about 1,200 acres, you know, certainly not if it is also full of other exclusions. You know, if it's 1,200 acres and class 1 and BLTs, you know, we're left with nothing.
Well,
So,
I'm confused as to if you make the other exclusions, you're never going to get to the 1,200 or 1,800 cap, and no matter what exclusions we put in place, based on the current hosting capacity as set forth by the Public Services Commission, and that they're projected to do even over the next several years, we're not going to even come close to either the 1,800 or the 1,200 as it currently stands. I'm just a little bit confused. I mean, you know, at certain points we're connecting this to reality, and at other points we're talking this in a very aspirational way. I'm not saying that that's not important, and I share your concern and urgency and understanding of the problem and the need for everybody to be part of the solution. But the idea that if we set the cap at 1,800 versus 1,200, that will add an additional layer as it currently stands, we couldn't get to that if we wanted to. But can I just pause? I think it would be very helpful because we're talking on this map about a lot of different things, and I very much appreciate Chris because you incorporated a number of things that I requested specifically, and so I appreciate that. But it would be helpful for me if Mr. Chris can explain the difference between category 1 and 2 and prime as a category, because that's a key discussion point and one of the main amendments. And so if it's amenable to the chair, I'd like to ask him to explain that.
Okay, I do want to say others, council members have had their names in, and I've lost track. I'm sorry. I don't know anymore what the order is. So I think Evan is probably ahead of you, Andrew. I'm not actually sure you put in a text message.
I did, but I'm happy to yield to Evan as long as after that you'll turn to Mr. Chris.
And only if Evan wants to. Thank you. Evan, did you want us to do now or?
Well, I'll be brief as I have been, because quite frankly, we are all in educational mode, and that is obvious to anybody who's watching. And so we all came in thinking and presuming with various levels of assumptions, and I really appreciate staff from the council and from other parts of county for walking us through this. We needed to slow down and have these important conversations that we all had our bearings straight. I think there's still a lot here that needs to be chewed over. And so I know we had a hard stop at 3:30 in 15 minutes, so we will clearly be continuing that conversation for everybody who's following it, and let the conversations continue. But just circling back to comments that Councilmember Rice said, I just want to say at this point, because I really haven't talked, because I've been listening and I've been trying to learn throughout this process. But I think Councilmember Rice is absolutely right that there should not be a false choice between farming and renewable energy. And what this tough conversation is all about is trying to figure out how we do that, and do that in a smart way to preserve the land that we all want to protect. And so I'm going to stop talking so that I can continue listening and learning, and then we'll continue this conversation for another time.
All right. Andrew, you wanted to, and then we'll go to Will after you.
Yeah, could we just have Mr. Chris, I know Councilmember Rice also asked for this, but Mr. Chris could explain what, categories 1 and 2 versus prime, since that's a key decision and discussion point that we are talking about and that we have put on the map. And it has major implications to agriculture, of which you understand better than anybody here who's been talking, Mr. Chris.
So it's surprising how deep into soil science has gotten.
I think he meant Jeremy Chris from agriculture to just explain the quality of the land.
Sorry, yes, exactly.
Okay. Well,
using Christopher's map, if Mr. Chris could explain the difference of what we're talking about, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So I would like to ask Chris McGovern to show us the two charts in the soil survey again, so that I can show you the difference between the capability classification for 1, 2, and 3 that clearly outlines the intent for yields of crops per acre. So this is the two charts that you compared earlier in your presentation, showing where there was a difference between the charts. There you go. That's the first chart for prime. And I believe the next table that you showed is for capability classifications. Now let's read. I know it's hard to see, but let's all read together. I think it says Table 4, land capability and yields per acre of crops and pasture. Now these are very important words. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what is memorialized in the state statute that I'm prepared to show you if you wish, And also it's memorialized in your county statute, Chapter 2B of the County Code. So your agriculture guys, Mike Sheffel and myself, we look at soils from a perspective of what soils are the best for growing crops to increase yields per acre. Now, there are other types of designations for soils. For instance, a civil engineer, they have to look at what the soils are good and how the soils can be used for construction purposes. So this is very important. We don't want to be putting buildings and foundations on soils that are not adequate for a structural sound foundation. So it is my view that the previous chart that Chris McGovern has shown you helps to understand those very soils that are prime for construction purposes, which is obviously what Park and Planning does with Chapter 50 of the subdivisions for preliminary plans of subdivisions. So I just would like to make sure you understand that what we do in the Office of Agriculture is we look at soil capability classifications 1, 2, and 3 because A, the state of Maryland requires us to do that, and B, the county code requires us to do that. So I'm not arguing whether one way of looking at the soils is right or wrong. I'm just trying to make sure you all understand that when we are evaluating farms for agricultural preservation, which we are responsible for doing, we have to make sure that each of the properties has at least 50% of the total acres, a combination of soil capability classifications 1, 2, and 3, in order to be eligible for the public investment to purchase the development rights through the easements, whether it's state or county. So I simply am trying to explain to you what I've been doing my whole career and why. And
could I just ask a follow-up, Ms. Chris? There's a difference between categories 1, 2, and 3 and prime. All prime is categories 1, 2, and 3, but not all categories 1, 2, and 3 are prime. Could you just briefly explain the difference?
No, actually, what has always been known is that class capability 1 and 2 are considered prime, and class 3 soils are considered productive. That has been the traditional understanding of how you take the soil capability classifications of 1, 2, and 3 and equate it to the terms prime and productive.
Okay, but then based on the, I'm sorry, I thought it was 1, 2, and 3, and then 4 and 5 was productive. I guess I misunderstood that. But based on the chart that was shown before, 1 and 2 was different than prime. That's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to have you help us explain to us here.
Okay, so the previous chart. If Chris would like to take us to the previous chart, okay, if you could blow it up a little bit. As you can see, they have the soil name. They don't have anything listed here for an analysis of crops per acre per yields. And that's because you'll see the words above. Urban or built-up areas of soils listed are not considered prime farmland. So this is a different analysis of soils that is not completely tagged to the analysis for crop yields per acre. And again, you're asking your agriculture guy, what does prime and productive mean? And I'm trying to respond to you that I don't look at this chart here at table 5. I don't look at it. Now, why is it that I don't look at it? A, it's not in the state statute. If you want, we can show it to you. Mike's got it pulled up, ready to go. B, it's not in Chapter 2B of the county code. This table 5 is not in your county code. What is in your county code is the next table 6 on page 141, for capability, land capability classifications 1, 2, and 3.
So, Mr. Friedson, if I could just ask briefly, so what I'm hearing is that, so 1, 2, and 3, Mr. Chris, you're saying is the right set, in your opinion. That's what you should be basing productivity of the land on, and how likely it is to yield the largest amount of crops or whatever it's going to be, crops, as opposed to the other classification of prime, which is, you're saying, mostly a planning. It's a different usage.
Yes, sir. That is what I'm saying. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
So, sorry, can you just summarize again, Jeremy? USDA prime. I don't know if it's USDA prime, but prime soil. Do you agree that what we've been saying today when we talk about prime soil is also prime soil, or is it potentially something different?
It's something different, and it's something that the Office of Agriculture does not use. And it's because the state statute and the county statute require us to do something different.
So if we were to provide an exclusion in this for prime soils as we have mapped them today, we would not actually achieve a goal that you would describe as tailored to protecting those soils that you think are more important. We might be, well, I guess, yeah.
Can I just say, I'm going to withdraw. I yield to the Office of Agriculture. Based on what we heard from planning, I was leaning towards, a certain categorization, but I don't think we should refer to categories that the Office of Agriculture does not agree on or support. And so I'm backing away from my original and going back to what I had, proposed in my memo. And I think if categories 1 and 2, and if there's an interest 3, but or the way that the Office of Agriculture and how it's currently listed, we should be consistent with that. And so I apologize for the misunderstanding based on what I thought I learned from planning, and I will go back to what I had originally proposed.
Well, that's okay.
I could answer your question, Hans, if you wish.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not even sure if I know. Tell me what my question is, too.
You asked me of my view of the numbers that you all have been talking about. 16,817 acres if you just take out the prime soils, 13,554 acres if you exclude just class 1 and 2 soils, and then of course the last number, 7,620 acres for looking at all 3. Yeah. And it concerns me with those numbers that you're using, and it's only because of what the state requires us to do and that the county has already memorialized that. And that's the only reason I'm answering the question that I am. It has nothing to do with what I want to achieve or what you want to achieve. I just want to make sure you folks understand, if you give Mike a chance to turn his screen on, he'll show you what's in the state code, the county code, and it will memorialize what we've just seen in the soil survey.
Well, so I don't know if I don't know if we had said 330. It is now 330. Are you saying that Mike has a map that?
No. Well, he might have a map,
no,
but
he's going to define what the state code says. But I think we're back to sticking to the classes, which is what is preferred by the Office of Agriculture. I think we should follow agriculture in the Ag Reserve, and I think we're all on the same. We might disagree on the content of the amendment, but I think we should agree on, that's what we're going to discuss here. At least I'm withdrawing what I had proposed. So
I do not have a map. I do not have a map.
All right. I don't know that. I think we should follow up with you. I would like to follow up with you to get that information, but
absolutely,
I think we need to, and I would encourage other council members to do the same. I think we're going to need to call it a day here shortly. Again, I certainly want to say from my perspective, these are complicated issues. why I think the acreage cap makes the most sense. And, we've been going through this. It sounds like, if I understand it, the problem with doing what we could have done, had we just proceeded, is that we would have said, we're doing this because we think it is the most productive soil. And in fact, we would have been doing something a bit different.
May I?
Jeff, yeah, go ahead.
This is a council choice.
Right.
Chris McGovern did consult with Frederick County, who used the prime farmland table. It does say prime farmland, and it says not for urban use if you go on the top of that table on page 140 of the manual. There is no doubt that the state, for the purposes of buying easements and within our own code, refers to the soil classifications. That's not a disputed issue. That's all that it will say. It would say you use soil classifications 1, 2, and 3. That's fine. The geography of this, as well as the productive nature of the farmland, is what the council should be concerned with. Remember, Frederick went with the prime soils table as opposed to the soil classification. So it is something you can choose to do. And after that, I'm quiet.
All right. I think we're gonna call it a day, and we're gonna come back to this at the next session.
Real quick, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. At the last session, you had given us marching orders to have amendments ready and all of this stuff. And what I just heard you say, I missed the exact detail, but you had encouraged us to follow up. I don't know if it was with Jeremy or whom else. I just want to, again, just get our bearings straight. So
I think it's Jeremy has additional information about soils, and I would encourage you to follow up with him yourself. I think it is, if you include significant soil restrictions, it matters probably more what the information is.
I got it. Okay.
If like me, you want to look at an acreage limitation, it matters less. And I don't know that there's, so I think that's the kind of the big picture here.
Well,
how you want to
Jeremy and I have spoken numerous times in the last few days, and I guess that streak will continue.
Yeah.
Lucky
One
you,
clarification as well. One, just to clarify on that point, unless there was an interest in re-proposing what I have just recently withdrawn, which is to go with a prime classification like Frederick County has, then that would be an important point. But if we stick to the categories, then that's where we've been the whole time. I just want a couple things. One, Councilmember Joanna proposed lowering the 1,800 to 1,200. I didn't know if that was a formal amendment and whether or not we are going to be discussing that at the next meeting, or where that stands. And then there's a number of existing amendments that I just wanted to see what the plan was. Are we going to vote on any of those now? Or are we going to wait till next meeting to?
Yeah, we're going to pick up where we've left off. We've dispensed with a fair number of issues, and then next time we'll pick up where we've left off. I'll call on you in just a second.
I'll second the 1,200 of Councilmember Joanna. So that's officially one of the things that we will discuss at the next meeting, and then I presume we'll take up the other issues.
Okay, you didn't have to second it. I think we were probably going to discuss it regardless, but thank you. Jeremy, did you want to add something?
Just for clarification, there's 2 points. First of all, Jeff said that Frederick County, as a matter of choice, used the prime soils. He is correct about that. But what he's not considering is that Frederick County also adopted the language of the Maryland Farm Bureau that says that priority preservation areas are off limits. Now, that's the policy of the Farm Bureau to prohibit both prime and productive soils, and areas within priority preservation areas should not be used for placement of solar. And Frederick County chose to use the prime soils definition and then also their priority preservation areas. In Montgomery County, so far in our conversations, we've not used reference to the priority preservation areas, and that's because the entire agricultural reserve is a priority preservation area. And so I want to make sure that that point is made. The other point on BLT, a BLT does not equate to 25 acres. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that at the next meeting so that I can make sure you all understand how the building lot termination program works. That's all.
Absolutely. We will get into everything else tonight. I do want to correct the record. I misstated the size of the average farm. I think it's more like 115 acres.
118 acres.
118 acres, and the median farm is about 25 acres. So there's a lot of really big farms. There's a lot of really little farms. And in any event, okay, call it a day. Thank you very much. Insert agricultural humor here. And thank you so much. Tom, anything you want to say to close us out?
Nope.
All right.
Progress today.
Thank you very much.
We've all grown tired. We've been growing tired.
We've been growing tired. It's time to harvest this day. And
All right, take your pick. Let's go.
All right. Bye, everybody.
With up-to-date transportation information to aid you in your daily commute.